students of Reddit, what is something your teacher has done that made you think, wow, how hasn't this person been fired yet? He brought a thermos with more whiskey than coffee to work every day. By early afternoon he'd be a reeking, slurring mess. A history class in 7th grade. Every day he would sit outside the classroom before the bell would ring and talk to the teacher next door until it was 10 minutes into the period. Then he would turn on the news and say, history is happening around us, learn it as it happens. Then he would snack on Little Debbie's and read the newspaper for an hour. Not gonna lie though, that was hysterical. Awful teacher but funny. Had a human anatomy and physiology teacher that said you get muscle cramps because your muscles dry up and rub against your bones. Oof owie ouch. My sophomore algebra teacher was known in the school for being the biggest butthole, but he was tenured so he knew he was safe. After one particularly brutal test he must have gotten some complaints from the students because in the next class he handed out articles to everyone about how self-esteem doesn't exist and it doesn't matter. WTF. When I was in culinary school, first trimester and the class was stocks, sauces, and soups, the instructor was clueless. This is a pretty prestigious culinary school and he was teaching us things like using powder mix to make demi-glace to save time, making roux with flour and water so there wouldn't be added fat, and that for added flavor, when making vegetable stock, throw in bones and scrap meat from any given animal. We would say yeah, but that's not veggie stock, that's chicken beef stock, and he would just get pissy. He was fired after that trimester and we got to take that class again. Art teacher. Called black and white primary colors, pronounced gouache gouache, threw a kid against a wall for back-talking her and dang near broke her arm. One of those things is not like the others. I had this English teacher in high school who doesn't like taking criticism or anything that involves telling her that she is wrong. So during halfway through the semester, our teacher decided to post our marks. My friend and I checked to see what kind of mark we got with the bulls we'd written all semester. I got 75% while my friend got a whopping 1081%. My friend was confused while I was wondering what kind of bulls did he write to get that mark. Obviously it was a mistake, so we decided to let the teacher know about it. When we did, she started to throw a fit and yelling at us that she made no mistakes. By the time she started yelling, the whole class already noticed the 1081% that my friend got, and decided not to say anything since we all knew she wouldn't listen. By the time class ended, the whole class decided to give my friend a pat on the back, mentioning how he is gonna get a full ride scholarship and congratulating him for getting the highest possible mark in existence. That 1081% stayed that way for the rest of the semester, and my friend decided to frick around to see how low of a mark he can get before the semester ended. By the time we got our report cards for the semester, the teacher finally corrected the mistake, and due to my friend's fuckery, he fortunately got a passing grade of 53%. He honestly didn't care about the grade but was slightly disappointed that the teacher wasn't prideful enough to leave the 1081%. Too bad. I bet he could have gotten a nice scholarship with that grade. When my teacher decided to spend the last month of the quarter in Iceland on vacation without telling us he was leaving, he then decided he didn't want to grade any assignments before final grades were due to the school, so he gave every student a B in the class regardless of if they did any work or not. I also forgot to mention he's now the head of his department. When a fight broke out in the classroom, our maths teacher screamed in the most panicked, fearful screech, "Someone get a teacher." I'm a 24-year-old man and sometimes I'm in a situation where I'm looking around and I'm just like, I need an adult. Made a rule that no one could wear those sweats that had buttons all the way up the leg in class, no idea why. Then proceeded to rip them off the first student who wore them to his class, a female student, who wasn't wearing shorts under them, in front of an almost full classroom and a hallway full of students headed to their next class. Attended a private school where our uniform was a polo tucked into khakis. Our principal walked up to a girl who had her shirt untucked and proceeded to put his hand down her pants to tuck it in for her, from the front, nonetheless. My intro to C and Unix professor graded nothing until finals week. Like, Not a single dang assignment, meaning you had no idea whatsoever how you were doing in the class until it was almost over. If you asked him about grades, he'd say he'd have everything graded next week, but next week never came. Blatant violation of university policy. At the drop deadline, all past assignments must be graded. A lot of us suspected that even after finals, nothing actually was graded. He'd just assign grades at random, but without seeing our papers we can't prove it. Also, same guy, if you'd ask him a question about the homework he'd look at it, scratch his head for a few seconds, and say I don't know, how to do this. Go ask. Smart kid in the class. Also, same guy again, his tests had almost nothing to do with the lectures. Fortunately, they were all open laptop tests, so we'd basically just Google everything, learn it for the first time on the test, and write that, which, TBH, is probably how all computer science tests should be administered since that's how coding works in the real world. But I can't imagine the department liked that. I heard he was going to be fired, but I've got him for 2 classes this semester. Friendly guy, but staggeringly lazy and incompetent. So I have a couple stories about bad teachers who deserve to be fired. I went to public school in a poor district, so we didn't exactly get the cream of the crop. One experience was amazingly bad though. I had a teacher who didn't teach at all. His class was him putting on a movie every day while the students played cards, dominoes or chatted. One day a friend and I were listening to an Adam Sandler cassette. The one with the principal who would call girls into his office and masturbate. We were laughing at this part when the teacher came by and asked to listen. He took it to his desk and came back a bit later with 3 detentions for each of us. I was complaining about the situation to another teacher later. This guy was the computer teacher, probably the only teacher in the school who actually had skills. He mentioned to me that the bad teacher had given him a tape to edit. The tape included some pretty inappropriate things. The bad teacher was also the coach for a girls team, soccer or volleyball, don't remember which. He was making sexual innuendo to them, zooming into their breasts, etc. Of course this is high school so they are all underage. Good teacher was on the fence if he should report it, and I encouraged him to do so. So, bad teacher ended up fired, but was allowed to finish out the school year. I don't know how he knew about my involvement, but he clearly did because he spent the rest of the year trying to make my life miserable. He did some weird crap that I still don't understand. Like drew a hump on the chalkboard and asked me what it was. I think it was supposed to be a breast, but still don't get what he was trying to do. Once I saw him staring at me during a test, I just stopped what I was doing and stared back. The whole thing was so weird. Staring back to show proper dominance. Smart. I had a middle school teacher that spoke with extremely broken English, and yet taught English literature class. How he even got chosen to teach that class I don't know. He wasn't good at teaching anything, but that wasn't the thing. Or rather, things. He would assign homework and it was 50/50 whether or not he'd actually collected the next day. I don't mean forget. He would just dismiss it. Or when he collected quizzes, he would take them to his desk and it was abundantly clear he wasn't reading anything other than the name, and grade them all in a couple of minutes. Everyone either got an A or a C. If you questioned him about it he'd angrily tell you to sit down. Any kind of class reading or lecture, he would have students read out the material while he stood in the corner with his arms crossed. He made it clear that he was not happy to be there, or sometimes we would do nothing. He would not even look up from his desk. Just tell us to read from your textbooks until the bell rang. On PTA nights he would be there, because he was required to, but he would lock his door and ignore anyone who knocked. There were so many complaints against him from parents, students and some other teachers, but the school administration didn't care. God, I hated every crappy day at that school. Nobody wanted to be there, less that the people who worked there. This is me right now in high school. For some odd reason, the administration loves hiring people who have thick accents. I could not understand my algebra teacher who was from Pakistan. It led me to switch to a different class because I was failing already. My first grade teacher would get in your face and scream at you if you asked to go to the restroom during class. Several kids peed themselves. My 5th grade teacher was fired due to his penchant for showing a lot of movies and asking the girls in the class to give him a massage at his desk, in the dark, in the back of the classroom. One afternoon while Cheltenham was on horse racing fair, I snuck out of school with a few friends after lunch and we headed down to place our bets and watch a few races. I had physics that evening and wasn't too bothered as I hated it. Before the racing could begin we were thrown out of the bookies for being underage, so we all headed to a pub down the street. While we were sitting in the corner watching the races, guess who walked in? My physics teacher. He didn't spot us and went to the bar, ordered a pint, pulled out his newspaper and sat reading while glancing at the TV. Talking to others who attended class, we learned there was no sub-organized to cover for him. I like that you guys are too young to gamble but not too young to drink. In a high school woodshop class, a black kid was using a drill press and wearing a hoodie with super long strings on. Obviously, this is super dangerous and against the rules because the strings could easily get caught in the machine. Our teacher saw this, walked over to the kid, shut off the machine, and then grabbed the wood he was working on and smashed it against the wall. He then yelled fricking N as loud as he could. I had a math teacher single out all the kids with learning disabilities during a test. These students, points to 3 individuals, have learning disabilities. What is the rest of the class's excuse for taking so long to finish? Holy, that is messed up. Told me the only thing I'm smart enough for is working on a construction site and to not even bother trying anything else. B. Nice. 70-80% of construction workers make more than HS teachers. Latin teacher caught a chicken nugget in his mouth that was thrown from the other end of the lunchroom. To make it even more impressive, the lunchroom functioned as the auditorium, so it was quite the featuring. He later got fired for doing a student in his closet. What a guy. As the saying goes, when in Rome, pork a student in the armarium. Had a teacher tell me I was going to heck. He also said that God gives something to overcome to everyone and proceeded to tell the class about how he had to work through his pee and masturbation addiction during his college years. He was like 27 at most. Told all the boys in our class that they could talk to him about it if they needed to. I honestly don't think he was trying to be perverted by it, but goddamn he was an butthole. One of my teachers found out I was gay and spent the whole of the rest of my time at school speaking to people around me to ask me questions, as if he was afraid if I spoke directly to him I'd spread homoitis to him. Told a student they were so worthless that even McDonald's would not hire her. To be fair, she was the same student that faked having cancer to get attention and McDonald's did not hire her when she attempted to get a job there, but some things are better left thought rather than said. I laughed and now I feel bad. That one math lesson where I spent it huddled under a table because people were throwing chairs and smashing windows springs to mind. She was actually a sweet teacher, but she had no authority. She was not cut out to be a teacher, at least not at the school I went to. Also had another math teacher who did literally nothing when kids were throwing those little firecracker packets at him. I got assaulted in that lesson and he moved me to the back of the class, not the bullies. My GCSE IT teacher once refused to teach when his football team lost. He did barely any teaching on the normal days as well. Last semester this happened to me, and I'm still unexplainably pissed off about it. I'm a very shy person in class. I barely talk unless I'm called on, and I absolutely hate talking in front of people. I usually wait until after class to ask the teacher a question or just talk to them about something they said. This teacher was just a douchebag right off the bat. I asked him a question about the syllabus I thought could wait after class, just because I was curious about it, and he told me to ask the next day in class and I'll get an answer. I thought alright, whatever. Maybe he thought it was a good question or something. I ask it in class. Remember, I hate talking in class or in front of people. He tells me I should have been paying attention from last class. I was embarrassed and a little bitter. Then there's a 4-person group project we have to do that required a survey and analyzing the data then presenting it to the class. I tell my group I will do all of the hard work and make the presentation if they do all the talking. They accept. I get it done like it wasn't even a problem. We present it. We get half off because I didn't talk. Never was it in the rubric that everyone in the group needs to talk, let alone mention that everyone needs to talk. Groups before us didn't have everyone speak. My group asks why we all got half off when I don't want to toot my own horn. I did a great survey, analysis, and presentation. He says he didn't hear from the entire group. I'm freaking livid at this point. I talked to another professor about it, and he's been my professor for 3 semesters at this point, so he knows what kind of student I am. He agrees with me that it's fricked, but he said he'd help me with my speaking in public for the final assignment in the other class. Final assignment comes. I do a great presentation, report, and some bomb butt speaking. I didn't stutter once or forget what I had to say, and had the entire class's attention. They asked me a whole bunch of questions and I felt great about it. I get my paper back for it, and he accuses me of plagiarism. I bring this crap up to him, and he tells me because I didn't quote anything. I had full quote and citations for every quote. It was a freaking college paper. Of course it was done correctly. I go to my dean. They ask the teacher, and he changed my grade for the entire class. Mother sucker wanted to fail me when I rightfully deserved to pass. I passed all of my tests and quizzes with A's and B's, so there was no reason I wouldn't pass. He also apologized to me on the last day of class and I told him to frick off. Only time in my 21 years of life I've spoken rudely to a teacher. He's apparently done this to other students, but they just accepted the grade in his class, which was still passing but not a good grade. I refused to take any classes with him as a professor. Dang. Good job on actually reporting the problem to the dean. I hate people who just ignore problems. I had a religion teacher in high school named Mr. Wen, who was working on becoming a Jesuit priest and was a really cool guy. We also had this kid in my class who was a really annoying smart butt, but Mr. Wen was always really patient with him, until one day he pushed him too far. I forgot exactly what the kid said, but it definitely crossed the line. Mr. Wen slammed his fists on his desk and shouted, "Why can't you ever shut the frick up?" He then picked up his stapler and chucked it at the kid, missing his head by a few inches and leaving a huge dent in the wall, and then stormed out into the hallway. Jesuit. In 5th grade, right before 9/11, I had a former Marine math teacher that was deadly accurate with chalkboard erasers. He'd pitch that crap at kids who slept on his class like some MLB level pro. He was a great teacher despite being a hard-ass. Plus it was always funny to see that perfect plume of chalk dust explode from the other side of a kid's face. This is tame for this thread, but there's no way you could get away with hurling projectiles at children nowadays. We had tea bags thrown at us only 6 years ago. Teacher was just as crazy. English college teacher made a joke that if we read this one book he liked, I think The Horse's Mouth, we could have our way with him. He kind of acted like he was drunk, but I don't think he was, just real odd and aloof. Joke. My high school drama teacher gave my entire class a lecture on how if girls were going to dress the way we did. This was the early zeros, so flared jeans and babadle t-shirts, basically. Then we had no one to blame but ourselves when the boys got ideas and raped us. She gave us this lecture twice. I'd been molested at around 10 and I know one other girl in that class was raped by a neighbor as a child. So I kind of spent both of those days just sitting there wondering if she had any idea how freaking inappropriate she was being. My 9th grade biology teacher was actually a woman who hated science and was an insanely religious volleyball coach. I'm not sure why they let her teach biology. She would always say that if you use any drugs, like anything that wasn't OTC or prescription, that your brain would literally unravel and become mushy. As she says this, she would point out the kids that smoked weed. But one time, when we were supposed to learn about evolution, she passed out Bibles and told us evolution is a joke. To such backlash from the students, all yelling at her, she starts screaming at the top of her lungs, breaks down crying, and runs out of the classroom. Creepy teacher hit on my sister during Pride Week when the cheerleaders had to dress up the day of the big game. Also, he would allow the boys to wear what they wanted for speeches, but specified that the girls had to wear skirts. If they didn't, he would drop them a full letter grade. Pride Week was at first wondering if the cheerleaders had to wear rainbow uniforms or something. Then I figured it out. In 1st grade I had a teacher who picked on me, and me alone for some reason. She sent me to the principal's office every day without raising my hand. She also illegally tested me for mental illness, and put me into a special reading group even though I had a above average lexile, just so she had to put up with me less. I will acknowledge I talked a lot, however it was 1st grade. Back in grade 10 I had science teacher that knew less science than the average grade 10 student, or maybe the same. Luckily when she marked tests she had an answer key and she could mark them properly, but while teaching she would only get the problem correct 60-80% of the time. A teacher needs to know that stuff inside and out. If you're only getting 70% of questions right at a grade 10 level, you can't teach grade 10. So many times the class had to correct her answers, and no, she was not doing it on purpose so that the class would point it out and learn. She would argue back even when most of the class knew she was wrong. Last year my Spanish teacher sold ice cream in her class for $1 per bar. They were a Mexican ice cream bar called Palatus that she got from a local guy. The school told her that she wasn't allowed to sell them in her class, but she continued to do so for a while after until they found out she was still doing it. She even told us that she had been told not to and that we needed to keep quiet about it. Also one day she had a substitute and kids just took them without paying all day. She lost like $200 worth of ice cream. Sleeping for the majority of the class several times. Then again he was a very unconventional teacher, and my favorite in high school. Better for than with. I might have read it wrong the first time. Not my teacher, but my sisters from 3rd grade. Constantly told my mom to get my sister tested for special needs because she wasn't doing well in class. Gave my sister hours upon hours of homework each night. At least 5 hours per night, for an 8-year-old. To the point my sister would be having breakdowns. Because my sister would zone out for a few minutes or just couldn't understand the class walk. Basically ruined my sister's self-confidence so badly that now, 10 years later, my sister still gets freaked out when she has any extra homework. The teacher she had the next year for 4th grade couldn't understand what the previous one was talking about. My sister was his best student. The teacher she had the next year for 4th grade couldn't understand what the previous one was talking about. My sister was his best student. Yeah, because I fixed her previous teacher while literally patting her own back. Had a class in high school where most of the learning was done online in the classroom and a student asked a question on how to start the lesson module, to which the teacher replied, "You hit enter course. Hi intercourse. Intercourse with your mom, boy." It was finals week. The given final of the day was chemistry, and a chem teacher gave his students all the answers for them to pass. He wasn't fired, but now I have him, and he has revealed to us that he does not have a teaching degree. She made me sit by myself at the corner of the classroom and said those were principal's orders, which was false. Would ignore me whenever I put my hand up, pretend she didn't hear me whenever I spoke in class, and would refuse to answer my questions. All because I dared to question her once. She was fired at the end of the school year, though. This probably sounds really cliche, but in high school it was an open secret that the shop teacher would drink Jack Daniels semi-frequently on the job, yet none of the administration seemed to care. Had a substitute French teacher come in and talk to us for 45 minutes about how weed is a magical plant and we should respect it, very clearly stoned. Back in high school we watched Uncle Tom's Cabin in a government class. Before the auction scene he announced that the best part was coming up, and throughout the class kept referring to Negros. I think they prefer Negros. Was known to cancel class at least twice per week despite only meeting 3 times in said week. If they showed up, the professor would be late and unprepared. Where did we leave off? Would administer the wrong exam. Assignments would go ungraded the entire quarter until finals week, where the grades seemed arbitrary. I sometimes ask my class where we left off last time. I didn't realize it was a big deal. It was mostly done to get folks calm and thinking about the last lesson. There was an Islamic girl in my physics class that wore a hijab. One day she was absent from class and another guy was sitting in her assigned seat. My teacher looked at the kid and said, "You're not," her name, then picked up a washcloth, threw it at him and said, "Here, put this on your head," and started laughing. I took a community college calculus class, and whenever any non-white student asked our teacher a question that he thought was a bad one, he would say "Welcome to America" in a fake Indian accent. My teacher right now, she makes fun of somebody for doing math wrong. It sucks. She once made fun of my laugh. Partied hard with ex-students. Like, Nude pics recording the event partying hard. In fairness, she was fired when it all came out. I don't really have a problem with that. They weren't current students, as long as they were of age. My 7th grade math teacher screamed at me and told me my passion in music was useless and said, "You are going to be the biggest failure that this school will ever produce." Continued music and found out I had quite the talent for it. You the saddest man 420 is better known for his real name, Paul McCartney. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.